The frozen plains of Dakota stretched out like an endless canvas of desolation, where every gust of wind carried a secret of the past, and every dust-laden mile whispered of a future yet to be written. In the pale light of an uncertain dawn, the stagecoach, a creaking, weather-beaten relic of a bygone era, lumbered to a halt amid the half-frozen dirt road, its wheels crunching and scraping over the brittle earth. The cold was a living thing here, slicing through the silence like a sharpened blade, carrying with it the bitter tang of ice and a haunting promise of change. Clara Winslow stood at the threshold of a new beginning. Just hours before, she had left behind the refined, orderly world of Boston, a world of polished sidewalks, elegant soirees, and the comforting predictability of a life steeped in tradition. Now, with a heart both heavy and hopeful, she ventured into a realm that offered not the embrace of luxury, but the raw, untamed challenge of survival on the frontier. The harsh beauty of the Dakota plains was a stark contrast to the graceful familiarity of her former life, and it stirred in her an emotional cocktail of trepidation, excitement, and unwavering determination. As she clutched the handle of her travel trunk, Clara's thoughts churned like the swirling winter winds around her. Every step away from Boston was a step toward an uncertain destiny, a destiny where each sunrise promised both struggle and the possibility of rebirth. Her breath, visible in the crisp morning air, formed tiny clouds that mingled with the mist rising from the frozen ground. Beneath her carefully wrapped wool cloak, her heart beat with a steady rhythm of hope and anxiety, as though it were announcing to the universe that she was ready for transformation, no matter the cost. In that frozen moment, the stagecoach's doors swung open to reveal a harsh landscape that seemed to mock the delicacy of her past life. The sprawling prairie, with its half-frozen fields and wind-whipped grasses, appeared as a rugged, indifferent sentinel guarding secrets of the wild. Here, nature ruled with uncompromising severity. The very earth beneath her boots was a testament to centuries of enduring harsh winters and unforgiving summers. Yet within this austere terrain, there was a kind of beauty, a raw, cinematic splendor that beckoned the brave and the restless. Clara's mind flashed back to the gentle clatter of Boston's cobblestone streets and the soft murmur of genteel conversations over tea. Those memories now seemed like echoes from another lifetime, a world of opulence and refinement that had long lost its place in her heart. The sophisticated elegance of her past clashed with the stark reality of the frontier, where survival depended on resilience, grit, and the willingness to embrace the unpredictable. In this new world, every moment was a battle between the fragility of the past and the relentless demands of the present, a battle that Clara was determined to win. The stagecoach, its wheels burdened by the weight of both time and hope, creaked to a stop in the midst of the boundless prairie. In that fleeting instant, the muted glow of dawn began to spill across the horizon, casting long, trembling shadows that danced across the frozen landscape. The light was soft and uncertain, like the first hesitant notes of a symphony poised to crescendo into a powerful movement. It was in this transient, ethereal glow that Clara felt a stirring of destiny, a silent promise that her journey would be as transformative as it was treacherous. Every detail of the scene was etched in vivid clarity. The crunch of gravel underfoot, the low murmur of the wind as it whistled past, and the faint, almost imperceptible hum of life that persisted despite the biting cold. The camera of her mind zoomed in on the stagecoach, capturing the worn wooden panels and the tarnished brass fittings that gleamed dully in the early light. It was as if the very vehicle of her escape was a time capsule, carrying her away from the familiar confines of the city and into a realm where every breath was a struggle and every step was a triumph. As Clara stepped down from the stagecoach, the chill of the Dakota morning enveloped her like an old, unyielding friend. The cold was relentless, a constant reminder that the journey ahead would test not only her physical endurance, but also the resilience of her spirit. Yet within that icy grasp, there was an undeniable warmth, a spark of determination that refused to be extinguished. It was the warmth of a soul ready to confront its fears, to shed the remnants of a life that had become too predictable, and to embrace a future that promised both peril and possibility. The contrast was palpable. The delicate refinement of her former existence, filled with genteel manners and carefully constructed routines, now gave way to a life where every moment was raw and unfiltered. Here, in the vast, open expanse of the frontier, there was no room for pretense. Every gust of wind, every flurry of snow, carried with it the promise of hardship and the potential for a rebirth of the human spirit. The land was wild and untamed, and its challenges were as profound as the beauty that lay hidden within its unforgiving embrace. As the first rays of the dawning sun pierced through the lingering mists, illuminating the frosty plains with a soft, golden hue, Clara paused at the edge of a rugged dirt path. Before her, a solitary wooden sign creaked in the wind, its weathered letters spelling out the name of a small town. Bismar. It was here, at this unassuming threshold, that her past and future would converge. Each step toward that town represented a leap into the unknown, a venture into a realm where every heartbeat echoed with the possibility of discovery, and every footfall resonated with the pulse of a new beginning. With the open road stretching endlessly before her, and the chill of the morning urging her onward, Clara took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. The door to Bismar loomed in the distance like a portal to a world brimming with untold stories, waiting to be written in the language of struggle, passion, and redemption. Every fiber of her being was electrified with the promise that the journey would be fraught with challenges, yet it was also imbued with an irresistible allure, the call of a destiny that demanded she cast aside her former life and step boldly into the wild embrace of the frontier. And so, with a heart pounding with both fear and anticipation, Clara Winslow stood at the precipice of her new life. The silent promise of adventure shimmered in the cold light of dawn, as if the very winds of the Dakota plains were urging her to move forward, to embrace the uncertainty with a resolve as unyielding as the land itself. With one final, lingering glance at the frozen expanse behind her, she stepped toward the weathered door of Bismar, each footfall echoing the unspoken question: what new wonders and terrors awaited her on the other side? In that charged, almost sacred moment, as the chill of the morning mingled with the warmth of her resolve, Clara could sense that her journey was only just beginning. Every step forward was a promise to herself that she would not be confined by the memories of a bygone life, nor by the constraints of a world that no longer belonged to her. Instead, she was about to write her own story, a tale of resilience, passion, and the unyielding pursuit of a future where every moment, every breath, was a testament to the transformative power of hope. The town of Bismar rose before Clara like a faded promise of a life uncharted. The wooden buildings, weathered by countless winters, stood in tight clusters along a crooked main street. Their rough-hewn facades, stained by time and soot, spoke of a rugged existence where survival was a daily battle. A faint aroma of burning coal drifted from the forge, mixing with the crisp night air and the gentle glow of oil lamps that cast dancing shadows on the uneven pavement. Every element of Bismar exuded a sense of raw authenticity, as if the town itself were a living relic of a bygone era. Clara stepped off the stagecoach and surveyed the scene with wide, inquisitive eyes. Her heart pounded with both apprehension and an odd thrill at the prospect of what lay ahead. She felt the weight of her past receding behind her, replaced by an undeniable curiosity about the people who called this harsh frontier home. As she adjusted the straps of her travel trunk, a group of locals gathered nearby, their eyes fixed on the newcomer with a mixture of suspicion and silent welcome. Among them was a weathered old man, his face etched with deep lines that told the stories of long, unforgiving winters. He greeted her with a gruff nod. "New in town, miss?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that carried years of hardship. Clara smiled politely, replying, "Yes, sir. Just arrived, looking for a fresh start." The exchange was brief, but it set the tone. A a tapestry woven with both wariness and hope. Then, as if drawn by fate, Clara's gaze was intercepted by a man standing a few paces away. He was tall, with broad shoulders that seemed to defy the biting chill, and his eyes, dark and piercing, observed her with an intensity that sent a shiver through her very soul. This was Garrett Callaway, a figure of mystery, with a reputation whispered among the locals as a man of few words but many secrets. His expression was as unreadable as the storm clouds gathering on the horizon, yet there was an undeniable magnetism in the way he carried himself. Their first meeting was quiet, yet electric. As Clara approached, a hush fell over the small crowd. The murmur of voices subsided, replaced by the soft crackle of distant embers from a nearby fire. Garrett's eyes locked with hers in a slow motion, moment that seemed to stretch into eternity. In that silent exchange, the rugged, stoic exterior of the man was momentarily softened by something else. A flash of vulnerability, perhaps, or a glimmer of understanding that transcended the harsh realities of the frontier. "Welcome to Bismarck," Garrett finally said, his voice measured and low, each word deliberate. His tone carried the weight of his own unspoken history, a burden that seemed to rest heavy on his broad shoulders. Clara's heart fluttered in response, caught off guard by the unexpected tenderness in his otherwise steely demeanor. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper, betraying the mixture of excitement and trepidation that churned within her. The natural cadence of their conversation felt as though it were orchestrated by fate itself. Around them, the local residents resumed their subdued chatter, the ambient sounds of Bismarck weaving into a background symphony of creaking wood, murmuring wind, and the soft glow of oil lamps that seemed to spotlight this fateful encounter. In the midst of this delicate moment, another local, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and weathered hands, stepped forward, offering Clara a bundle of small, hand-sewn parcels. "We're all a bit rough around here," she said warmly, her accent thick with the local drawl. "But we look after our own. Welcome, dear." Clara accepted the parcels with gratitude, feeling a warmth that belied the bitter chill of the night. Yet, even as the locals exchanged friendly banter and gestures of hospitality, Clara's attention remained fixed on Garrett. There was something about him that resonated deeply with her, a stark contrast to the polished gentilities she had known in Boston. His eyes, so full of both defiance and sorrow, hinted at battles fought on more than just the physical planes. It was as if every scar etched upon his rugged face told a story of lost love, unspoken pain, and relentless survival in a world that showed no mercy. The scene unfolded like a carefully choreographed cinematic tableau. Slow, deliberate camera-like, pans would have lingered on Garrett's steady gaze, shifting softly to capture the flicker of vulnerability in Clara's eyes. Intercut with these close-ups were sweeping shots of Bismarck itself. The rough wooden storefronts, the hazy glow of oil lamps in the gathering dusk, and the smoky tendrils rising from the forge that hinted at the enduring spirit of the town. As the night deepened, the conversation between Clara and Garrett turned to quiet observations of the town. "This place, it's a far cry from the life I once knew," Clara admitted, her voice a blend of wistfulness and resolve. "There's a raw beauty here, something real." Garrett's gaze, unwavering and intense, softened just slightly as he replied, "Out here you learn that beauty often comes wrapped in hardship." His words, simple yet profound, sent a ripple of understanding through Clara, echoing the tumult of her own thoughts. In that moment, as the gentle murmur of the town wove around them, Clara felt an inexplicable pull, a sense that this meeting was not mere coincidence but a turning point in her life. Every word, every glance, carried with it the promise of something momentous waiting just beyond the horizon. The interplay of light and shadow on their faces, the subtle cadence of their voices, and the silent mutual acknowledgement of a shared destiny created an atmosphere charged with anticipation. Just as Clara began to allow herself to imagine the possibility of a future intertwined with this enigmatic man. A brief pause fell between them, a pregnant silence that seemed to hold the weight of unspoken confessions. The dim glow of the oil lamps flickered, casting fleeting patterns on the weathered faces of those gathered, as if to underscore the gravity of the moment. Then, breaking the silence with a calm yet compelling finality, Garrett spoke a single line that would etch itself into Clara's memory forever. Out here, every soul carries a story of pain and promise. And tonight, I reckon yours is just beginning. His words, delivered with an intensity that resonated deep within her, left Clara momentarily breathless. In that single sentence, she sensed that her journey, fraught with hardship, danger, and the hope of renewal, was about to unfold in ways she could scarcely have imagined. As the echoes of his words mingled with the distant murmur of the town and the gentle rustling of the Dakota wind, Clara stood rooted in place. In that charged, cinematic moment, the future loomed vast and uncertain, laden with challenges and unspoken possibilities. With every beat of her heart, she felt the gravity of her own destiny pulling her forward, urging her to step deeper into the unknown, where every shadow might conceal a secret, and every flicker of light promised the dawn of a new life. The fateful encounter had set the stage for a journey that would test the limits of her courage and the strength of her convictions. And as the first hints of a stirring storm began to ripple on the outskirts of Bismarck, Clara couldn't help but wonder, what else did this rugged, unforgiving land have in store for her? And for the mysterious, alluring man who had already captured a piece of her soul. The journey into the untamed Dakota wilderness began under a sky that was still heavy with the remnants of night. Clara and Garrett set off together on horseback, leaving the rough-hewn welcome of Bismarck behind them. The vast prairie unfolded before them, a seemingly endless expanse of frozen earth, where the biting chill of early winter met the first hints of an approaching storm. Every hoofbeat on the frosted ground echoed like a drum roll, announcing the commencement of a trial by nature itself. As they rode side by side, the landscape transformed in the shifting light of dusk. The sun, a fading ember in the sky, cast long, distorted shadows over the barren fields. The Dakota horizon, usually so distant and mysterious, now appeared as a living canvas, painted with hues of crimson and amber. The cold air, sharp and relentless, carried with it the scent of ice and distant wood smoke, mingling with the earthy aroma of thawing soil. It was a moment of surreal beauty, a slow-motion panorama where nature's grandeur was inextricably linked to the struggle for survival. Garrett, ever the picture of calm resolve, guided his horse with expert precision along the narrow, winding trail. His hands, calloused yet gentle, held the reins as if they were extensions of his own will. Each measured movement of his strong arms belied the fierce determination that lay beneath his stoic exterior. Clara watched him in quiet admiration. His expertise and unflinching demeanor provided a steady anchor amid the swirling uncertainty of the wild. Clara herself fought to maintain her composure, despite the biting wind that whipped against her face and the ever-present threat of nature's caprice. Memories of a refined, orderly life in Boston were now as distant as the stars that had guided her to this desolate frontier. Her heart raced, not with fear alone, but with a heady mix of apprehension and exhilaration at the raw, unpredictable power of the land. Every gust of wind seemed to carry a promise of hardship, yet also a whisper of renewal, urging her to forge ahead no matter the cost. The first true test of their resolve came as the sky darkened abruptly, and a violent snowstorm swept in with little warning. The once bright horizon was swallowed by a wall of swirling white, turning day into an eerie twilight. The path ahead became treacherous, the frozen earth slick with ice and concealed pits. Clara's pulse quickened as she felt the cold seep through her layers, threatening to numb both body and spirit. But even as the tempest raged, she clung to the strength that had brought her this far. Garrett's calm presence became an unspoken beacon in the chaos. With unwavering focus, he urged his horse forward, his eyes fixed on an invisible point beyond the immediate fury of the storm. "Keep close, Clara," he called out over the howling wind, his voice firm, yet reassuring. His words were a lifeline, amid the pandemonium, a reminder that in the midst of nature's relentless onslaught, there remained a spark of control, a reason to persist. In a brief lull, when the storm's fury momentarily abated, a quiet intimacy settled between them. They paused beneath the dim glow of a hesitant sunset, the sky now a tapestry of muted blues and soft purples. In that fleeting calm, Clara could almost forget the terror of the wind and the chill of the cold. Instead, she found solace in Garrett's steady gaze and the warmth of his presence. Their eyes met in a slow, deliberate exchange, a silent communication that needed no words. In that look, there was shared understanding, a promise of mutual protection, and hope in the face of overwhelming odds. The storm, however, was far from over. As the tempest resumed its relentless assault, the landscape blurred into a chaotic mix of swirling snow and distorted shadows. The world around them became a blurred impressionist painting, sharp contrasts of light and dark, movement frozen in slow motion, every element charged with tension. The rhythmic clatter of hooves and the muted sound of desperate breaths formed a symphony of survival that resonated deep within Clara's soul. They pressed onward through the driving snow, navigating a labyrinth of slippery trails and hidden crevices. The treacherous terrain tested both their physical endurance and their emotional resilience. At one point, the path split unexpectedly beneath a canopy of skeletal trees, their barren branches reaching out like pleading hands. Clara's heart pounded as she carefully adjusted her footing, the fear of falling mingling with the overwhelming desire to continue despite the odds. Beside her, Garrett's expert maneuvering kept them both moving steadily forward. His unyielding determination was a constant reminder that the harsh elements of the Dakota plains were formidable, but not insurmountable. Amid the maelstrom, there were moments of startling, unexpected tenderness. During a brief respite under the sparse shelter of a rocky outcrop, Garrett leaned closer to Clara as they sought warmth. The wind howled around them, yet in that microcosm of shelter, time seemed to slow down. With a soft smile and eyes that shone with a rare vulnerability, he murmured, "Sometimes, the cold makes you appreciate the warmth even more." His voice, low and gravelly, carried a depth of emotion that resonated with Clara's own hidden longings. Their shared smile, illuminated by the flickering glow of a makeshift lantern, was a quiet rebellion against the merciless fury of nature. The cinematic quality of the moment was palpable. The camera of Clara's mind zoomed in on the details. The frost tracing intricate patterns on the leather of Garrett's gloves, the determined set of his jaw, and the resolute sparkle in her own eyes as she absorbed the transient beauty of the scene. It was as if the world around them had paused, allowing them a fleeting glimpse of a reality where hope and despair, danger and beauty, danced in perfect, precarious balance. Yet, just as the tranquility began to ease the weight of the storm's relentless assault, an unexpected sound shattered the fragile peace. Amid the roaring wind and the pummeling snow, a single sharp crack of a gunshot echoed through the icy expanse. The sound was distinct, chilling in its clarity, an ominous warning that shattered the brief moment of calm. In that heartbeat, the world transformed from a battle with nature into a confrontation with an even graver threat. Clara's heart lurched as the echo of the gunshot faded into the cacophony of the storm. She exchanged a quick, alarmed glance with Garrett, whose expression hardened in an instant. The serene intimacy of their recent exchange was abruptly replaced by a steely, unspoken readiness for the dangers that now loomed on the horizon. The once rhythmic patter of falling snow now carried a sinister undertone, and the vast, indifferent plains of Dakota suddenly felt fraught with a palpable menace. In that charged moment, as the howling wind mingled with the residual silence of a single defiant gunshot, Clara realized that their journey was about to take a darker turn. The echo of the shot was not merely a sound, it was a harbinger of the violent confrontation that lay ahead. With every instinct alert and every sense heightened, she braced herself for the unknown, the treacherous nature of both the wilderness and the human threat now converging upon them. And so, as the snow continued to swirl in a dizzying dance around them, Clara and Garrett pressed onward, each determined to face whatever dangers the Dakota plains would throw their way. The promise of a new beginning was now shadowed by the ominous threat of an outlaw gang lurking in the storm's depths. Their journey, already a test of courage and endurance, was about to enter its most perilous chapter yet, one where every decision could mean the difference between survival and oblivion. The bitter wind had barely settled its fury when a low, urgent warning broke through the tumult. A grizzled local, his face lined with years of hardship, had ridden up on a rickety horse with eyes wide in alarm. "Outlaws! There's word of a gang on the move!" he gasped, barely audible over the clamor of the storm. His words sliced through, the murmur of the wind igniting a spark of dread in every heart. Clara's grip tightened on the reins, and Garrett's jaw set in determination. The warning was clear. Danger was closing in. Within moments, the peaceful, albeit harsh rhythm of their journey shattered into a chaotic frenzy. The outlaws emerged like phantoms from the swirling snow, a ragged band of riders, faces obscured by scarves and hats pulled low, their eyes gleaming with ruthless intent. The once vast, silent plains now pulsed with the tension of impending violence. Without hesitation, Garrett spurred his horse into a gallop. "Clara, hold tight!" he bellowed over the roar of the wind. The chase was on. The pounding of hooves against the frozen earth merged with the pounding of Clara's heart. She could feel the raw surge of adrenaline, the fine line between terror and exhilaration as the outlaws closed the gap. Gunshots erupted abruptly, a deafening symphony that reverberated across the icy expanse. The sharp crack of rifles punctuated the tumult, each report echoing off the distant ridges as if the very mountains were mourning the violence. The first bullet whistled past, embedding itself in a nearby boulder, and the ground trembled under the force of the impact. Garrett's eyes narrowed behind a furrowed brow as he expertly guided his horse through the chaotic melee. His voice was low and commanding, urging Clara to maintain her focus despite the chaos swirling around them. "Keep close, and don't let your guard down," he shouted, his tone both reassuring and resolute. Clara fought to steady herself, her breath coming in ragged bursts as she tried to navigate the slick, treacherous ground. The relentless barrage of gunfire created a cacophony of sound that mingled with the roar of the storm, a symphony of survival. Each shot, each echo of metal against wood, sent shivers down her spine, yet the fear was laced with an unmistakable determination. She was not merely a bystander, she was now an active participant in this struggle, fighting for every heartbeat in the face of death. As the outlaws drew nearer, their faces became visible for fleeting moments, contorted in grim determination, eyes alight with malice. The sight galvanized Clara and Garrett into action. Side by side, they began to maneuver through the barrage, their movements a blend of instinct and practiced precision. In the midst of the relentless storm and gunfire, a quiet, unspoken bond began to forge between them. Each shared glance and synchronized maneuver spoke volumes of trust and mutual reliance. In one particularly harrowing moment, a bullet ricocheted off a nearby rock, narrowly missing Clara's head. Her heart hammered as she clutched the reins, feeling the fierce surge of gratitude for Garrett's unwavering protection. He moved like a man possessed by purpose, every muscle tensed as he anticipated the enemy's next move. The cinematic interplay of light and shadow, brief flashes from muzzle flashes against the dark sky, captured the raw intensity of the confrontation. Close-ups of their determined faces would have revealed the micro-expressions of fear, resolve, and an emerging, unspoken tenderness. Garrett's eyes, once guarded and inscrutable, now shone with a fierce protectiveness that made Clara's pulse quicken, even amidst the chaos. Every breath they took was a silent prayer for survival. Every shouted command a promise of defiance against the darkness closing in. The battle raged on with brutal clarity. The rhythmic thud of hooves, the sharp crack of rifles, and the desperate shouts of combatants filled the air, composing a score of survival. Clara found herself locked in a moment of fierce courage as she swung her rifle, her arms trembling with effort yet steady with resolve. With each shot fired and each outpost of enemy riders downed, she felt the growing weight of responsibility, not only for herself, but for the man beside her, whose life now intertwined so deeply with her own. Between bursts of gunfire, a poignant silence fell, a momentary lull in the storm of violence. In that breathless pause, as snow continued to fall in thick, blinding flurries, Clara caught sight of Garrett. His face, illuminated by the sporadic flare of gunfire, was a study in determination and quiet vulnerability. For a split second, time seemed to stretch, allowing their eyes to meet amid the chaos. In that look, there was an unspoken exchange, a shared understanding of the danger they faced, and a mutual recognition of the profound bond that was forming under the most extreme circumstances. Yet, as quickly as that fragile moment emerged, it was shattered by the relentless tide of conflict. A stray bullet, merciless and unanticipated, struck Garrett in the side. The sound of the impact, a wet, heavy thud, resonated through the turmoil, and time itself seemed to freeze. Clara's heart lurched as she saw him falter, his face contorting in a mix of pain and disbelief. The world around her slowed to a surreal, excruciating pace as she reached out instinctively, her fingers desperate to grasp him, to pull him back from the brink of oblivion. "Garrett!" she cried, her voice cracking with fear and determination. The shock on his face, the sudden lapse in his stoic facade, sent a surge of panic coursing through her veins. The battle still raged around them, gunshots, shouts, the relentless charge of enemy riders. But in that instant, all of it faded into a distant, haunting backdrop. Her only focus was on the man who had become her anchor in this maelstrom of chaos. Garrett staggered, his breath coming in ragged, pained gasps as he fought to remain upright. The heavy snow seemed to press down upon him, every flake a reminder of the brutal cost of this fight. Clara knelt beside him, her eyes wide with a terror she had never known, feeling the chill not just of the storm, but of the possibility that she might lose him. Her hands trembled as she tried to stem the flow of blood from the wound. A desperate, instinctive act of defiance against the encroaching darkness. As the furious battle continued unabated in the distance, a profound silence settled between them. A silence filled with the heavy realization that the cost of survival was far greater than she had ever imagined. In that moment of intimate crisis, as the sounds of war blurred into an indistinct roar, Clara felt an overwhelming surge of love and dread intertwined. She could see in Garrett's eyes, now clouded with pain and vulnerability, a silent plea, a question of whether he would survive this ordeal, whether their fragile connection would be severed by the cruelty of fate. Just when hope seemed to flicker like a fragile candle in the biting wind, a final, piercing gunshot shattered the tenuous calm. The sound, stark and unforgiving, echoed across the snow-covered plains, leaving Clara with an aching certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. In that heart-stopping instant, as the battle continued its merciless onslaught, Clara was forced to confront the terrifying possibility that the man she had come to rely on, the man who had silently claimed her heart, might slip away into the cold darkness of the Dakota wilderness. And so, as the storm of violence raged on and the chilling realization set in, Clara clutched Garrett's trembling hand, her eyes locked onto his wounded form, as the relentless night promised that the true cost of their struggle was only just beginning. In the aftermath of the brutal skirmish, the world outside seemed to have fallen silent. The raging storm and the harsh clamor of battle had given way to a delicate stillness that filled the small, weathered shack where Clara had hurriedly carried Garrett. The humble shelter, once a mere refuge from the wild Dakota winds, now served as a sanctuary where the wounded man lay on a rough-hewn cot by a modest, crackling fireplace. The warm, golden light of the fire danced across the room, casting long, gentle shadows on the walls, while the steady murmur of the wind outside provided a quiet counterpoint to the soft, almost imperceptible sounds of life within. Clara knelt by Garrett's side, her fingers trembling as she carefully unwrapped a strip of cloth to press gently against the wound on his side. His face, usually etched in stoic determination, now softened with pain and vulnerability. The rhythmic pop and sputter of the fire, along with the steady heartbeat she could almost hear beneath the quiet crackling, filled the space with an intimacy that was both fragile and profound. Every detail of this tender scene, the calloused hands of a hardened frontierman now so tenderly cradled by Clara's careful touch, the way his eyes fluttered as he struggled against the haze of pain, seemed imbued with an unspoken promise of hope and redemption. "Garrett," Clara murmured softly, her voice a mixture of worry and resolve. "You need to hold on. We're going to get through this." As she spoke, her mind swirled with memories of her life before the Dakota, an existence defined by the refined rituals of Boston society. Now, faced with the raw reality of a world where survival was carved out of hardship, she felt both lost and, strangely, more alive than ever before. The gentle act of tending to his wound stirred deep emotions within her, a mingling of compassion, regret, and a newfound sense of purpose. Garrett's gaze, heavy with unspoken pain, met hers briefly, and in that quiet exchange, a flood of emotions passed between them. "Clara," he rasped, his voice low and edged with vulnerability. "I've been on my own for so long. I never imagined I'd find someone who'd care enough to stop and help." His words, raw and sincere, hung in the air like fragile glass waiting to shatter. In that moment, the hardened exterior he had meticulously built over years of solitude began to crumble, revealing the deep scars of loss and the quiet yearning for connection beneath. The conversation that unfolded in the warm glow of the fire was a slow unraveling of their pasts and the wounds they each carried. Clara recounted memories of her childhood in Boston, days filled with gentle laughter, the delicate clink of tea, cups at afternoon gatherings, and quiet evenings filled with soft music and whispered confidences. She spoke of the expectations placed upon her, the subtle, suffocating chains of propriety that had left her feeling trapped, even in a life that others envied. Garrett listened, his expression softening with each word. When it was his turn, he shared fragmented memories of a life marred by hardship, a childhood lost to the unforgiving wilderness, a love that had faded into bitter solitude, and a past filled with battles both on the open range and within his own heart. His voice, though rough and measured, carried the weight of decades of isolation and regret. "I used to believe that strength meant shutting everyone out," he confessed, his eyes glistening in the firelight. "But maybe it's not about how hard you can be on the outside, but how deeply you allow yourself to feel on the inside." In the soft, tender silence that followed, their hands found each other, Clara's delicate fingers intertwined with Garrett's calloused ones. And for a moment, the only thing that existed was the shared warmth between them, a warmth that defied the cold of the outside world. The cinematic quality of that moment was striking. The fire's glow painted intricate patterns on their faces, every line and every shadow telling a story of pain and resilience. Close-ups in her mind captured the gentle tremor in his hand and the determined set of her jaw, every small detail a silent vow that they would endure together. Their whispered promises and gentle caresses spoke of a burgeoning bond that transcended the chaos of the earlier battle. As Clara dabbed at the wound with careful precision, she couldn't help but notice the quiet strength in Garrett's eyes, a mixture of gratitude and a lingering, unspoken fear. It was as though each scar on his skin was a testament to the battles he had fought, both against the ruthless elements of the frontier and the demons of his past. And yet, In that moment of vulnerability, he allowed himself to trust, to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was still room in his heart for something tender and transformative. Time seemed to stretch in the small, secluded room. The outside world, with its howling winds and hidden perils, faded into a distant memory. Instead, all that remained was the rhythmic sound of the fire, the soft rustling of wind against the wooden walls, and the quiet, mutual understanding that passed between them. They spoke little, yet each glance, each small gesture, conveyed volumes. When Garrett's eyes closed briefly against a sharp pang of pain, Clara's hand gently squeezed his in silent encouragement, and his faint smile in response was a promise of resilience. A silent affirmation that he would fight not just for survival, but for the chance at a shared future. Just as the fragile peace began to settle over their intimate haven, the tranquility was shattered by a sudden, insistent knock at the door. The sound was sharp and out of place in the gentle cocoon of their newfound solace. Clara's heart skipped a beat, and she exchanged a worried glance with Garrett, whose face momentarily tensed with concern. With slow, cautious steps, Clara moved toward the door, the soft glow of the fire casting long shadows on the floor as she reached for the handle. Each creak of the old wood seemed to echo the silent dread that began to creep back into the room. Before she could fully comprehend the intrusion, the door swung open to reveal a figure shrouded in the dim light, a messenger whose arrival threatened to undo the fragile peace they had so carefully nurtured. In that instant, as Clara's eyes widened with a mix of fear and uncertainty, the serene world inside the small shack was poised on the brink of a new, unexpected storm. What news could this stranger possibly bear, and how would it shatter or perhaps reshape the tender intimacy that had blossomed between them? The quiet promise of hope now hung by a thread, waiting to be unraveled by the unwelcome announcement that had just crossed the threshold. In the quiet after the storm, as the flames of the hearth danced softly on the worn wooden walls, Clara found herself alone with a letter that had been slipped under the door. The paper was aged and creased, its ink faded by time yet potent with the weight of secrets long buried. With trembling hands, she unfolded the letter and began to read. Each word peeled back a layer of mystery about Garrett's past, a past that he had guarded so fiercely, hidden behind his steely eyes and taciturn manner. The letter spoke of battles not only fought on the rugged frontier, but of wounds etched deep into the soul, of loss and betrayal that had transformed the man she thought she knew. As Clara absorbed the revelations, her mind raced between disbelief and a deep, unsettling sorrow. The images the letter conjured were as vivid as they were haunting. A young Garrett, once filled with hope and promise, gradually hardened by the brutal realities of frontier life. A man who had endured unspeakable tragedies, a family lost to a ruthless ambush, a love turned to dust by betrayal, and a series of events that had forced him to shut himself away from the world. The contrast between this tormented past and the man who now lay wounded before her was jarring. Could the tender, protective soul she had come to cherish truly harbor such darkness? In the flickering light of the fire, Clara's thoughts began to weave between the present and the ghostly echoes of Garrett's past. The cinematic quality of the moment unfolded in her mind as slow-motion flashbacks, scenes of a youthful Garrett laughing with abandon in the golden light of a summer day, only to have that joy stolen in a flash of violence, the anguished expressions of loved ones lost, their voices silenced forever by the harsh hand of fate. These memories, blurred by time and pain, intermingled with the stark reality of the man before her, his rugged features now marred by the marks of hardship and loss. Clara's inner dialogue was a tempest of conflicting emotions. How can I love someone whose past is so shrouded in sorrow? She wondered silently, her heart pounding in her chest. Her logical mind urged caution. Could she, in good conscience, take on the burden of his haunted history? And yet, the love she felt for him, a flame kindled in the midst of relentless chaos, burned too brightly to be extinguished by fear alone. Every tender moment they had shared, the gentle squeeze of his hand when words failed, the soft, unspoken promises exchanged in the quiet corners of the night, now seemed to shimmer with a bittersweet intensity. Her eyes drifted to Garrett's sleeping form, illuminated by the soft glow of the fire. His rugged features, so often set in a mask of resolute strength, now relaxed in vulnerable repose. The letter's revelations cast a long shadow over that image. Is it possible, she thought, to embrace all of him, the broken, the hidden, the unspoken, as well as the man I've come to love? The question echoed in her mind like a solemn refrain, each repetition deepening the internal conflict. Logic told her that love should not be conditional upon an idealized past, yet the fear of what lay beneath his guarded exterior gnawed at her resolve. As she turned the pages of the letter, Clara's mind conjured images of a bygone era, sepia-toned, memories where the past and present merged in a haunting, almost surreal dance. The flashbacks were rendered in slow motion. A younger Garrett, eyes bright with hope, standing in a field of wildflowers, his smile radiant before it was darkened by tragedy. The final, desperate moments of loss that had forged his current solitary existence, and the silent, painful choices he had been forced to make to survive. These vignettes, painted with the soft hues of regret and melancholy, played out in her mind's eye, blending seamlessly with the tangible warmth of the present moment. Garrett stirred, his eyes fluttering open as if awakened by the depth of her thoughts. For a brief, suspended moment, their gazes met across the room, the dim light of the fire capturing the vulnerability in his eyes and the tumult in hers. There was an unspoken dialogue in that look, a silent admission that both carried burdens, too heavy to share fully. Clara. His voice was barely more than a whisper, laden with the weight of unspoken sorrows. She hesitated, swallowing the lump of uncertainty that had lodged itself in her throat. Garrett, I read something today. Something about your past, she began, her voice trembling between apprehension and longing. The admission was gentle, careful, as if she feared the very sound of his name might summon the demons she had only glimpsed through the faded words of the letter. For a long moment, he said nothing. The only sound was the low crackle of the fire and the distant, mournful sigh of the wind outside. Then, with a deep, shuddering breath, Garrett spoke. There are things I've kept hidden, for my own protection and maybe for yours. His eyes, shadowed with regret and pain, searched hers as if seeking forgiveness, or perhaps understanding. I never wanted you to see me as I was before, broken by the past, burdened by what I lost. Clara's heart ached at his admission. In that fragile, charged silence, she felt the full magnitude of the choice before her. Could she accept him, all of him, knowing the darkness that had shaped him? Could her love be strong enough to mend the scars that time and tragedy had etched into his soul? Her thoughts swirled in a maelstrom of hope and fear, each memory of their tender moments intermingling with the painful truth of his concealed history. The soft glow of the fire painted shifting patterns on their faces, emphasizing the depth of their inner turmoil. Close-ups of their hands, the way hers trembled as she reached out, his fingers curling in tentative response, spoke a language of their own, one that transcended words and revealed the raw, unfiltered truth of their bond. In that luminous, intimate space, the past and present collided, leaving Clara to wonder if she was ready to shoulder the weight of a love so intertwined with sorrow. Every heartbeat pulsed with the question, was it better to embrace the man before, her scarred and complicated, or to retreat, to run from the painful legacy that might forever haunt their future? The storm outside, though now distant, seemed to mirror her inner conflict, a relentless echo of winds that refused to settle. And as the night deepened, casting long shadows over their shared refuge, a single disquieting thought emerged from the depths of her mind. If love is to conquer all, then perhaps it is in facing the darkest truths that one finds the brightest hope. But could she, in her fragile state of yearning and fear, find the courage to confront a past so marred by pain? With the fire's glow illuminating her tear-streaked face, Clara reached out once more, her fingers gently brushing against Garrett's. His eyes, filled with an ocean of sorrow and a flicker of longing, met hers with a silent plea for understanding. In that suspended moment, the weight of the world seemed to press down upon them, and the question hung unspoken in the charged air. Would Clara choose to stand by Garrett, embracing the full spectrum of his tortured history? Or would the ghost of his past drive her away, leaving her heart forever fractured? As the flames flickered and danced, casting intricate shadows that whispered secrets of long-forgotten times, Clara closed her eyes, steeling herself against the tumult of her emotions. The choice was hers alone, a choice between the safety of a life untainted by sorrow and the perilous, unpredictable beauty of a love that demanded the acceptance of every broken piece. And in that delicate, heart-wrenching pause, as the night whispered its solemn secrets, one question remained. Would she dare to face the haunted legacy of the man she loved, or would she let fear dictate the future of their intertwined souls? As the first light of dusk bathed the rugged landscape in a warm, amber glow, Clara felt an unwavering resolve settle in her heart. After countless restless nights spent wrestling with fear and uncertainty, she had finally decided. She would stand by Garrett and help him confront the painful ghosts of his past. The notion was as daunting as it was liberating, an unspoken promise to herself and to the man whose silence had become both his shield and his prison. Together, they embarked on a quest to unearth the buried fragments of Garrett's history. Their journey took them back into the heart of Bismarck, where the air was thick with old stories and the weight of secrets. The town, with its time-worn wooden facades and the familiar scent of burning coal from the blacksmith's forge, seemed to hold 1,000 whispers of days gone by. Clara and Garrett roamed its narrow streets, questioning wary locals and piecing together the scattered remnants of a life that Garrett had long since tried to forget. In a dimly lit corner of the town's dusty general store, an elderly man with kind yet sorrowful eyes recounted a fragment of the past. "I remember him well," he murmured, polishing an old horseshoe with a ragged cloth. "Back in his younger days, Garrett wasn't the hardened loner you see now. He had a fire in his heart, a passion for life, and he loved fiercely. But fate, cruel as it can be, dealt him a harsh hand. I heard tell of a terrible ambush on a small homestead, one that cost him dearly." His voice trailed off, leaving a heavy silence that hung between them like a dark curtain. Clara listened intently, each word deepening her understanding of the man she was slowly coming to love. As they left the store, the fading sun cast long, dramatic shadows over the dusty street, creating a cinematic tapestry of light and dark. Garrett's face, etched with both sorrow and a glimmer of regret, softened as he recalled the stories he had long kept hidden. "I never spoke of that day," he admitted quietly, his voice barely audible above the gentle rustling of the evening breeze. "I thought if I kept it buried I could keep the pain at bay. But the scars, they never truly fade." His words, raw and unfiltered, struck a chord within Clara's heart. She reached out, her hand brushing against his calloused one, a silent vow of solidarity. Their conversation meandered through bittersweet memories, each recollection painting a picture of a younger Garrett whose laughter once filled the wide open, plains whose eyes sparkled with dreams unburdened by loss. As they walked through the fading light, the couple paused by an old, weathered fence, where the remnants of wildflowers struggled to bloom against the odds. The interplay of light from the setting sun created an ethereal scene, accentuating the vulnerability in Garrett's expression as he spoke of the ambush that had shattered his world. "It wasn't just the loss of my family," he said, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where the last rays of sunlight merged with the approaching twilight. "It was the betrayal by someone I trusted, a betrayal that left me questioning everything I believed in. I learned that sometimes the strongest armor you can wear is the one you build around your heart. But that armor, it also kept me from ever truly living. His confession was a mixture of sorrow and reluctant acceptance, a turning point that allowed Clara a glimpse into the depths of his soul. Clara's own inner voice wrestled with conflicting emotions. She was drawn irresistibly to Garrett's wounded honesty, yet a part of her trembled at the thought of embracing such a heavy past. How can I help you heal if the wounds run so deep? She wondered silently, her mind awash with images of Garrett's anguished eyes and the tender moments they had shared in the quiet refuge of her care. But as the dusk gave way to the soft, lilting hues of early night, her resolve hardened further. Love, she realized, was not about running from pain, but about facing it together, no matter how unbearable the truth might be. In the soft glow of a nearby lantern outside an old barn, the couple found a temporary haven. The gentle murmur of crickets and the rustling of leaves provided a natural symphony that contrasted starkly with the tumult of their recent past. As they sat on a creaking wooden bench, Garrett's features were illuminated by a mix of lingering sorrow and the warmth of newfound hope. Clara leaned forward, her eyes searching his as she softly said, "We can't change what happened, but we can choose how we move forward. I believe that every scar tells a story. Our stories can become our strength if we let them." Garrett's gaze lingered on her, the raw vulnerability in his eyes meeting the steady, determined fire in hers. In that moment, the gentle cadence of his voice broke the quiet. "I want to believe that too, Clara. But sometimes the past feels like a shadow that refuses to lift. What if, by facing it, I lose you?" His words trembled with the fear of rejection, a fear that had haunted him through years of isolation. Her reply was as tender as it was resolute. "I've already seen the darkness in your past, Garrett, and I still choose to stand by you. Love isn't about perfection. It's about fighting through the pain and finding beauty in the brokenness." The sincerity of her words cut through the lingering gloom, igniting a spark of courage in Garrett's heart. The cinematic quality of the moment was undeniable. The interplay of light and shadow on their faces, the subtle rise and fall of their breaths, and the unspoken promise that they were embarking on this healing journey together. But just as their conversation seemed to pave the way for a hopeful future, an unexpected tremor of uncertainty shattered the fragile calm. As they returned to the quiet streets of Bismarck later that night, an enigmatic stranger approached. Man cloaked in the dim light, his eyes carrying an inscrutable mix of warning and urgency. "You're meddling in matters that might be better left alone," the stranger hissed, his voice laced with a foreboding accent that sent a chill down Clara's spine. "There are secrets about Garrett that even you haven't heard, and some truths are dangerous." The words struck like a bolt of lightning, sending shockwaves through the already tender atmosphere. Clara's mind raced. What new revelations could possibly threaten the delicate progress they had made? The stranger's eyes, dark and unyielding, held a secret that was poised to upend everything they had fought so hard to rebuild. As the stranger melted back into the night, leaving behind a silence heavy with implications, Clara was left with a haunting question. Was their newfound bond strong enough to withstand another devastating revelation? Standing under the pale glow of a flickering street lamp, Clara's heart pounded with a mixture of dread and determination. The promise of healing and hope now hung in a precarious balance with the threat of unknown dangers. In that charged moment, with the echo of the stranger's warning reverberating in her ears, Clara faced the ultimate crossroad. Could she continue to trust Garrett and help him overcome the shadows of his past? Or would the dark secrets yet to be revealed force her to abandon the man she had grown to love? The night stretched on, filled with the silent weight of unanswered questions and the palpable tension of a future teetering on the edge of uncertainty. And as Clara looked into Garrett's eyes that had once been so impenetrable now softened by pain and hope, She knew that the next step of their journey would test not only their resilience, but the very essence of their commitment to each other. The calm of the night was shattered once more when word of a new threat began to spread like wildfire through Bismarck. A more formidable gang of outlaws, scarred by past defeats and driven by vengeance, had returned with a singular purpose: to exact retribution on those they held responsible for their earlier setbacks. The air grew thick with tension as whispers of their ruthless intent drifted through the town. Under the flickering light of oil lamps, the fearful glances exchanged between townsfolk told a story of dread that could no longer be ignored. Clara and Garrett, still recovering from their previous ordeal, knew that the fragile peace they had nurtured was hanging by a thread. The imminent danger forced them to act swiftly. They gathered what little arms they could: old muskets, flintlock pistols, and even a few rifles scavenged from abandoned outbuildings. The once sleepy town of Bismarck was quickly transformed into a makeshift fortress, every wooden plank and cobbled street now a bulwark against the looming menace. As the new outlaw gang advanced, under the cover of darkness, the first signs of chaos erupted at the edge of town. Clara, determined and unyielding, stood at the forefront with a rifle clutched tightly in her hand. Her eyes, steeled with resolve, scanned the horizon for any sign of the approaching enemy. Beside her, Garrett moved like a force of nature, his face set in grim determination, despite the fresh wounds that still marred his rugged frame. His every step radiated the fierce responsibility he felt for the town and for the woman who had come to mean so much to him. In a burst of action that felt both sudden and inevitable, the outlaws descended upon Bismarck. The clash was instantaneous and brutal. Gunshots split the night as the outlaw gang engaged with the town's defenders. The sound of flintlock discharges mingled with the rapid thud of galloping horses. Amid the tumult, Clara fired with precision, her voice cutting through the din as she shouted orders to rally the townsfolk. Her determination was palpable. Every shot she took was fueled by the fierce desire to protect not just a town, but the future she envisioned with Garrett. Garrett fought with a relentless ferocity that belied his injuries. He moved through the chaos with a fluid grace, ducking behind weathered crates and dashing across uneven terrain. Even as a fresh wound throbbed with searing pain, he never wavered. Each time an outlaw drew near, he met them head-on, his voice a steady roar over the cacophony of battle. "Not today!" he bellowed, firing his rifle with a precision that left little doubt about his resolve. The cinematic quality of the confrontation was striking. Close-ups captured the raw emotion etched on every face, the flicker of fear, the unyielding determination, and the palpable sense of duty that permeated the air. The rapid flashes of muzzle light illuminated grim expressions for split seconds, each flash revealing the depth of human courage and desperation. The rhythmic pounding of boots and the rapid exchange of gunfire created a symphony of chaos that resonated with the heartbeat of the frontier itself. In the midst of the frenetic battle, Clara and Garrett found moments to support one another. At one point, as Clara fired at an oncoming attacker, an enemy charged from the side, and Garrett's arm intercepted the threat. His injured hand bloodied, but his resolve unbroken. Their eyes met briefly in that instant, an unspoken exchange. Affirming that they were in this fight together, Clara's steady presence bolstered Garrett's spirit, while his unwavering commitment gave her the courage to push forward, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. As the skirmish intensified, the narrow streets of Bismarck became a labyrinth of danger. The outlaws, relentless and well-coordinated, began to surround the town's defenders. The cacophony of battle grew louder, the rapid staccato of gunfire, the anguished cries of the wounded, and the clash of metal as makeshift weapons met with brutal force. Clara's heart pounded in her chest as she maneuvered through the melee, her every sense heightened to the point where the world narrowed down to the stark reality of survival. She could see every detail: the sweat on a frightened face, the grim determination in a hardened gaze, the fleeting glimpse of hope in the eyes of those who refused to surrender. Yet amidst the turmoil, there was a powerful sense of unity. Garrett, though visibly struggling with his injuries, rallied his strength and led a countercharge against the encroaching bandits. His voice, rough and urgent, called out to the townsfolk and to Clara, urging them to hold the line. "For Bismar! For our future!" he roared, his words echoing off the time-worn walls of the town. In that moment, every individual felt the weight of their shared destiny. A destiny forged in the heat of battle and tempered by the bonds of trust and love. Time seemed to warp as the battle raged on, every second stretching into an eternity of peril and hope. The interplay of harsh shadows and sporadic bursts of light painted an almost surreal picture of valor. In slow motion, Clara's determined face and Garrett's resolute expression were etched into the memory of the night. Moments of bravery captured against a backdrop of relentless violence. Each step, each breath, was a testament to the indomitable human spirit fighting against the odds. But just as victory seemed within reach, the tide of battle took a dire turn. In the chaos of a particularly fierce exchange, an enemy sniper emerged from the cover of a ruined building. With a single well-aimed shot, the sniper's bullet found its mark. The sound of the impact was drowned out by the surrounding chaos, but to those closest, it was unmistakable. A harsh, sickening thud that signaled calamity. Garrett staggered, his eyes widening in shock as pain coursed through his body, his strength faltering under the assault. Clara's heart plummeted as she saw him fall. In that instant, the battlefield, with all its chaos and fury, receded into a blur. All that mattered was the man who had become her anchor, now lying precariously on the blood-stained ground. The sniper's shot had shifted the balance of power, and for a heartbeat, the promise of triumph hung in a delicate balance between hope and despair. The scene reached a heart-stopping climax as the enemy, emboldened by their apparent success, surged forward in a final, desperate push. The air vibrated with tension, the sound of approaching footsteps and the whir of rapidly advancing danger filling Clara's ears. With tears streaming down her face and her pulse racing uncontrollably, Clara gripped Garrett's hand tightly, refusing to let go even as the world around them threatened to collapse into darkness. And then, in a final, harrowing moment that would leave the fate of their love hanging in the balance, the screen of their shared destiny faded into uncertainty. The enemy closed in on Clara, her determined figure silhouetted against the blazing remnants of battle, while Garrett lay wounded and vulnerable, a stark reminder of the fragile line between victory and defeat. The outcome was uncertain, and, as the relentless chaos of war surged around them, one question burned brighter than all others. Would their unyielding bond, forged in the crucible of violence and tempered by deep, enduring love, be enough to carry them through the peril that now loomed so large? In that charged, cinematic moment, as Clara prepared to face the onslaught with every ounce of strength and courage, the cliffhanger left the future teetering on a knife's edge, forcing everyone watching to hold their breath, waiting for the next decisive moment in their battle for survival. In the aftermath of the brutal battle, the night was heavy with a silence that was both haunting and bittersweet. The remnants of chaos had settled into a fragile calm, and in the dim, flickering light of a small campfire inside their makeshift shelter, the cost of the fight was etched across every face. Garrett lay sprawled on a rough-hewn cot, his breathing shallow and uneven. A deep gash along his side pulsed with pain, and every labored breath seemed to draw the very essence of his strength away. It was a moment that stole the breath from the room, a heartbeat suspended between despair and hope. Clara knelt by him, her eyes brimming with a fierce tenderness, as she gently pressed a clean cloth to his wound. Her fingers trembled not only with the chill of the night, but with the gravity of the sacrifice that had been demanded of them both. In that quiet, somber moment, the intensity of their connection was palpable. Two souls bound together by the fires of conflict, now facing a challenge that threatened to tear them apart. The warmth of the campfire danced on their skin, casting soft, golden hues over the scene, as if nature itself was trying to soothe the agony of their struggle. "Hold on, Garrett," Clara whispered, her voice breaking with a mixture of desperation and unwavering resolve. "We're not done fighting yet. I won't let you go." Her words, though soft, echoed with a determination that filled the small space. She recalled every moment they had shared, the defiant spark in his eyes during the battle, the way he had shielded her with his strength despite his own wounds, and it all converged into a single heart-wrenching realization. Love and sacrifice were the only ways to defy the cruel fate that had brought them to this moment. Garrett's eyes fluttered, open, clouded with pain, yet softening as they met Clara's. In that vulnerable gaze, she saw not the hardened, unyielding fighter of the battlefield, but a man who had borne the weight of endless sorrow and was now allowing himself to trust in the promise of renewal. "Clara," he murmured, his voice hoarse, laden with both regret and gratitude. I never thought I'd have someone like you by my side." His admission was raw, his tone both apologetic and resolute, a plea for forgiveness from a past he had long tried to forget. The flickering flames of the fire painted their faces with a tender light, every shadow a silent testament to the battles fought and the love that was being kindled amid the ruins. Clara's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, the evidence of her inner turmoil, and the unspoken promises that now bound their hearts. "I know what you've been through," she replied softly, taking his hand in hers. "But I believe that love can heal even the deepest of wounds. We'll get through this. Together." Her words were a vow, a sacred promise that they would fight the darkness, not as isolated warriors, but as one united force. As the night deepened, the silence around them became a canvas upon which they painted their hopes and fears. In the tender quiet, they began to share their truths, Garrett's recollections of a life marred by betrayal and loss, and Clara's confessions of the loneliness that had haunted her even in the midst of a glittering yet stifling past. Their voices, gentle and earnest, wove together a tapestry of vulnerability and strength. With every word, the emotional distance between them melted away, replaced by a newfound intimacy that was as potent as it was fragile. In slow cinematic sequences, the camera of their shared memory would have lingered on the delicate interplay of light and shadow, the soft glow of the fire reflecting in Garrett's pained yet resolute eyes, the tender tremor in Clara's hand as she caressed his cheek, and the quiet determination in their shared glances that spoke of a love willing to face even the harshest fates. The subtle rise of a smile on Garrett's lips, mingled with the shimmer of tears in Clara's eyes, captured a moment of pure, unadulterated connection, a silent promise that no matter the cost, they would hold on to each other. "Promise me," Garrett said, his voice barely above a whisper, "that you won't leave me when the pain gets too much, that you'll stay and fight with me, even when everything seems lost." His words, laden with the sorrow of a lifetime of solitude, hung in the air like a fragile prayer. Clara squeezed his hand, her gaze fierce and unwavering. "I promise, Garrett. I'll never let go. Together, we're stronger than any fate that tries to break us." For a long, suspended moment, time itself seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the gentle murmur of the wind provided a somber counterpoint to the soft murmur of their hearts, each beat echoing the promise of a future where love could triumph over despair. Yet, just as hope began to infuse the small space with a tentative warmth, a distant, barely perceptible sound stirred at the edges of their fragile haven. It started as a faint, rhythmic tapping, a sound that did not belong to the gentle night nor to the quiet pulse of the campfire. Clara's eyes widened as she listened intently, the sound growing in urgency. It was as if fate itself was trying to intrude upon the sanctuary they had so painstakingly built. With a sinking feeling in her chest, she slowly rose, her eyes never leaving Garrett's. "Did you hear that?" she asked softly, her voice laced with worry. Garrett's brow furrowed, and he shifted his weight. his expression a mix of fatigue and sudden alertness. Before either of them could fully comprehend the nature of the intrusion, the tapping turned into a low, persistent thrum, echoing ominously from the door of the shack. The moment stretched, heavy and taut with tension, as both Clara and Garrett exchanged a look of shared, silent dread. Their journey of sacrifice and rebirth, the fragile love that had taken root amid the scars of battle, now stood on the precipice of yet another unknown trial. In that charged instant, as the flickering flames of the campfire cast trembling shadows on the walls, Clara's heart pounded with the realization that their battle for survival was far from over. The new, mysterious sound hinted at an impending danger, one that could shatter the delicate sanctuary of their newfound intimacy. And as she stood there, hand in hand with Garrett, she knew that the strength of their love would soon be tested, in ways neither of them could predict. The scene faded into a cliffhanger, a single, lingering shot of the door, half shrouded in darkness, as the ominous sound grew louder. The silence of the night was broken by that mysterious rhythm, leaving both Clara and Garrett, and all who watched their story unfold, on the edge of a precipice, wondering what fate had in store next. As dawn broke over the gently rolling hills of Dakota, the golden light crept slowly across the horizon, heralding a new beginning. Clara and Garrett, their hearts still tender from recent trials, yet buoyed by the promise of recovery, rode side by side back into Bismarck. The town, once on the edge of despair, now welcomed them like a long-lost family returning home. Neighbors stepped from their modest homes with smiles of relief and eyes full of admiration, grateful for the courage that had preserved their little community. In the days that followed, the rhythm of life in Bismarck began to ease back into a hopeful cadence. Garrett's wounds, once a stark reminder of the brutal encounters they had faced, slowly healed under the attentive care of both Clara and the town's kindly healers. Every morning, as the soft light of sunrise bathed the small clinic in a warm glow, Clara would sit by his bedside, gently tending to his injuries. In those quiet moments, they would share whispered words of encouragement and tender touches that conveyed more than any spoken promise. The transformation of Bismarck itself mirrored their journey of healing. Once the streets had been haunted by the echoes of conflict, but now the community banded together to rebuild. Neighbors worked side by side to repair broken fences and patch up weathered storefronts, while children laughed and played in newly swept alleys. The air, fresh with the scent of new beginnings, carried the subtle perfume of wildflowers that had begun to bloom in the fields around town. Every blade of grass and every petal of the endless meadows seemed to whisper stories of resilience, echoing the spirit of a community determined to rise from the ashes. Evenings were spent around the communal fire, where townsfolk would gather to share stories and toast to the future. In these moments, Garrett's reputation as a hero was tempered by a gentleness that came from his struggle to overcome past demons. He would speak little of his own suffering, letting the light in his eyes, the subtle crinkle at the corners of his smile, and the firm grip of his hand on Clara's convey the silent truths of his journey. And in return, Clara's presence radiated hope, a steadfast beacon that showed everyone that even the deepest wounds could mend with time and love. One crisp morning, as the first rays of light spilled over the sprawling fields, Clara and Garrett found themselves walking hand in hand along the edge of a blooming wildflower meadow. The American countryside stretched out before them in a breathtaking panorama of vibrant colors and gentle movement, a living tapestry woven with the threads of hope, renewal, and unyielding determination. In the delicate interplay of light and shadow, the couple's features were bathed in a soft, ethereal glow. Garrett's weathered face softened into a rare, genuine smile as he looked into Clara's eyes that shone with the promise of a future free from the burdens of yesterday. They paused at the crest of a small hill, the sweeping vista below, capturing the heart of the revitalized town. From this vantage point, the renewed pulse of Bismarck was unmistakable. Small groups of people could be seen tending to gardens, mending old buildings, and sharing quiet conversations that spoke of community and belonging. It was a scene that encapsulated the transformation from hardship to healing, from isolation to unity, a future that was as delicate as it was inspiring. In that moment, with the world around them bathed in the gentle luminescence of early morning, Clara rested her head on Garrett's shoulder. The comforting weight of his arm around her spoke volumes of their shared trials and the bond that had been forged in the crucible of pain and perseverance. "I never thought we'd come this far," she murmured softly, her voice carrying both wonder and gratitude. "It feels like every day is a step toward something more beautiful, a future we're building together." Garrett's reply was quiet, yet imbued with a resolute certainty. "We've faced so much, Clara," he said, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun was rising in a blaze of color. "But every scar, every tear, has led us to this moment. I believe that what we've endured will make our happiness all the more profound." Their conversation was a gentle cadence, punctuated by long, meaningful silences and soft laughter that seemed to echo the rhythmic beating of their hearts. In these shared moments, the past was acknowledged without being allowed to overshadow the beauty of the present. They spoke of dreams, of a small home on the edge of town, of a family nurtured by love, and of a community that would continue to thrive despite the odds. The intimacy of their words was matched only by the unspoken promise that they would never let the darkness of their history dim the light of the hope they now carried. As the day progressed, the cinematic beauty of the scene grew ever more vivid. The camera of their memories would have lingered on the way the sunlight kissed the dew-dappled fields, on the tender smile that played upon Garrett's lips as he recalled a happier time, and on the sparkle in Clara's eyes that signified her unyielding spirit. Details, the soft rustle of a summer breeze, the quiet murmur of a brook winding its way through the countryside, the gentle brush of fingertips, became symbols of the fragile yet resilient nature of their love. Yet, just as the peace of this newfound existence began to settle into a harmonious rhythm, a subtle tension lingered in the background. One late afternoon, while the couple sat on the weathered porch of their newly restored cabin, a faint sound reached their ears, a sound that carried with it an inexplicable hint of foreboding. At first, it was barely perceptible, like the whisper of wind through a creaking window. But as the minutes passed, the sound grew more insistent, a distant rumble that seemed to echo from beyond the familiar boundaries of Bismar. Garrett's hand tightened around Clara's as he listened intently. His eyes, filled with both determination and cautious concern, met hers. "I can't shake the feeling that this is just the beginning," he said, his tone a quiet mixture of resolve and apprehension. The words hung in the air, a gentle yet unmistakable cliffhanger that left an indelible mark on the moment. Clara looked out into the gathering dusk, where shadows lengthened and the last hints of twilight melted into night. Despite the overwhelming sense of hope that had flourished within her, she could not ignore the chill of uncertainty that had crept back into her heart. "It seems like our journey is far from over," she whispered, half to herself and half to Garrett. "Maybe this is just the start of something even greater." Their eyes met once more, a silent dialogue passing between them, a vow that they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. The scene, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun and the gentle promise of the coming night, encapsulated the essence of their shared future, a journey of healing, resilience, and unwavering love that, despite its uncertainties, held the promise of endless possibilities. As they sat together on that creaking porch, the tender interplay of light and shadow, hope and apprehension, painted a picture of a love that had been forged in adversity and tempered by the passage of time. In that luminous moment, as the last of the sun's rays faded into a gentle twilight, a quiet, determined voice resonated in Garrett's words. "This is only the beginning." And with that, the promise of a future filled with love, challenges, and new adventures lingered in the sigh, ere a delicate invitation for what was to come, leaving the door open for the next chapter in their extraordinary journey.